This is the February conclave. And in this conclave, I want to discuss um, the idea of elder based structures. So, we've done this in the past where we've had a discussion about an idea and kind of built on it together, and then I've gone ahead and presented it. We did this for the ABK conference. I have a conference coming up later this year. It's a fairly large conference, and I want to present the ideas that we discuss here. And so I am very excited about it, and I'm really looking forward to having this discussion and presenting all of your ideas at the conference. So if you've missed what we did last time, you can go back and look at the recordings. I have lost a lot of the recordings because of the Vimeo issue that I'm having, but I do have the repeat of the ABK conference, and that recording has gone up as of yesterday. All the recordings are up, so you can have a look at it to understand how I kind of tie your ideas into a talk. And that's kind of exciting to see that happen. Okay, so with elder-based structures, we will start with sort of just exploring what elder-based structures are, how is it different from individual structures, what leadership looks like, and also I know that sometimes it's tempting to think of terms like elder based structures and think of them as very utopic ideas. They're so, oh, that's so good. We should all be doing that. But they're not always good. There are some downfalls to it as well. So we will like look at those aspects as well and navigate that space. So let's start by first exploring your ideas on what is your understanding of an elder based structure. What is it according to you? What are your thoughts? And I'd love for you to take a shot at it, whether you currently exist in an elder based structure, or even if you don't exist in an elder based structure, I'd love for you to discuss with me what you think it might be. I love what Toby is up to. I need to come to France just for him. Yeah.
I could give it a try. Although we don't live in an elder-based structure, and elders are less and less respected, and less listened to, and basically, I'd say considered as old jittery people who are not up to date with the current way of living and everything. Unfortunately, I guess in our society, that's more what's happening. But the way I see it is basically it's important to listen to their stories, listen to their stories about their lives, about the way of living, listen to their advice as well, because there's definitely a lot of things that they can share with us that would make this world probably a better place. Although it's just evolving very, very fast. And I think if we took the time to listen to their stories, it might help us to slow down a bit, to take a step back and to think about our society as it is at the moment. And, also listen to simple things like, cooking recipes, the way things were done in their day, little cleaning, how you clean things without using chemicals, and planting things and all sorts of things that we're kind of losing over generations. So I think that's my try at answering your question.
Yeah, sure. So I think you're kind of highlighting two aspects to it. One is sort of the value of an elder based system where there is transferring of wisdom, collect sort of it's generational wisdom, right? So if you actually have a system through which you're transmitting generational wisdom, you collect it, you build it, and then the next generation is able to build on that because they've kind of taken on what you have, and it builds and builds and builds. So it gives you a continuity through generations to pass on some information and knowledge. Um, and so I think elder based structures do that because there's a very clear path of continuity. Who passes what on to who is very clear in this, and it kind of continues to pass. And then the second aspect is, of course, the respect. Um, or I think sort of maybe not as much respect but credibility, right? Just acknowledging that, hey, there is something to be passed on, there is something to be listened to. So let's create a space for that. I think those are two aspects of an elder based structure that you highlight, which yeah, is kind of consistent with what I have seen. That's definitely something we see a lot of in what how we experience elder based structures. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Especially those of you who live in elder based structures. Do you have any thoughts on what an elder based structure means?
Yeah. Like elder based, so I did live with one of my like my mom's mom for like growing up. So for me, it's a little bit of also a negative feeling because it's the way it's passed on these things, right? Like she was a very dominating figure in my family, so everything basically revolved around her being the elder. So, like, I see the merit in, like, so when I have to look at this very subjectively, like, like, a child growing up in a household with different age groups, it makes a lot of sense in theory. Like, yeah, you can learn from so many different age groups, like from children to cousins to parents, aunts, then elders. But it's also very, it depends on the person how that's coming, how that information is coming on to you. If it's forced onto you, then it's not really, even though it might be right, but you don't want to accept it.
Yeah,
So I don't know how that, I mean, for me, it's going in that direction. Yeah.
yeah. So I think you highlight an important aspect of it, right? Because at the end of the day, whether we have kind of sort of leaders that are become leaders because they're elders, or leadership that's based on, I took that leadership, sort of a more forceful competitive taking on of leadership kind of a thing. It doesn't take away from the fact that there are good and bad leaders. We're all humans at the end of the day. Elders are humans too. They're not a special category of people. So there can be good and bad leaders as well. And so elder based structures are not exempt from the problems of bad leadership. So I think that's an important thing. And just excuse me because these are all like really interesting and important points. So I'm also making notes while we're talking. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think bad leadership is actually a very interesting one to discuss. And I come kind of circle back to that when we talk about the pitfalls of elder based structures, right? Is we can see it surface in two ways. One is bad leadership, but also elder based structures do not necessarily mean that elders are treated with this great utmost respect, because we also have elder abuse. That also happens. So we do abuse our elders too. So it's not exactly a very utopic way of doing it. But then again, if you look at what are other forms of leadership, right? Like take hierarchical leaderships, capitalistic leaderships. Are there no bad leaders? Yeah, there are. Is there no kind of abuse upwards? There are attempts. Not that there isn't. And there are attempts to abuse upwards, abuse our leaders, and maybe that the the reason for that abuse is kind of gaining leadership. It's given the name of competition, so it's not really seen as abuse, but you do see that conflict. So there is that conflict too. So they do exist. It's not I think that's kind of the parallel between the systems. Roma?
And so for me, like the elder-based structure, I can think of like two things. One, it comes from a very patriarchal point of view. So there is a set structure for, or a set of rules probably which women are expected to follow, and then there are some rules which are the men are expected to follow, and the women normally have stricter rules, and it's mainly passed on through generations. And then with elder-based structure, like especially like what I've realized in my house also is like when you have to voice out against it, so then it becomes like a rebellion.
Yeah. And I would again classify this not as a feature of an elder based structure, but a feature of any leadership structure, right? Any leadership, any form of leadership, are there no rules that you have to follow? 100% there are rules. For instance, the opposite of an elder based structure would be a very individualistic structure, which is a capitalistic structure, right? A very solid capitalistic structure. Is that free of patriarchy? Definitely not. Right? It's seeped in patriarchy, it's seeped in rules. So I think these are all kind of common features we have, and I think that's useful to highlight, right? As common features we have across any leadership models. So maybe it will be useful to see this in contrast with an individual based structure, an elder based structure versus an individual based structure. How is it different? And a good way to think about it for those who have been in elder based structures is think of how leadership may emerge, for instance, in a home environment versus how leadership may emerge in a corporate environment. What are the differences? Yeah, Juhi?
Yeah, like in a corporate structure, maybe um, you're also you're replaceable after a point, you know. In a home setting, you're not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I never thought about it. Yeah, I think a lot of elder based structures typically have everybody plays a role. Everybody plays a significant role in holding this up. It can be fairly disruptive for people to leave, and it's also fairly difficult to add people into it. So it's a fairly rigid structure in that sense. Whereas I think individual structures, it's easier to add and remove. So maybe a, a converse way of looking at it is if you have a scenario where there's a lot of addition and removing, it automatically tends towards capitalistic kind of competition based leadership. Whereas if you have a very stable kind of a structure that's um, more better suited than a volatile situation. So if you're looking for an elder based structure, you need a more stable kind of a situation, very fluid one with members getting in out all the time. It's very hard to pull off an elder based structure. You need stability, and that is so we've seen it so much in India, right? Stable to the point where we feel like pegged to our places, right? Like there is a place for you, you belong there, you're pegged to it. There's no fluidity, it feels very rigid. And I think that elder based structures need that, because that leadership requires very, very stable structures. Your grandma would not be the bossy grandma if you guys weren't around. If you guys were all removed and I had been put in there instead, and me and my friends were put in there instead, your grandma's leadership would just collapse. Right? Okay. Give me a second. Okay. Okay. What else do you see in difference? Yeah, no, no.
Well, it's my experience. I don't know vary about the elder structures, but it's what I feel. It's elder structures may allow more consideration about the needs of the people in the structure, because the corporate they they don't pay attention to the needs of the people of the structure. Point.
Yeah. So I think the right way to maybe look at that is elder based structures have space for people to consider each other's needs. So if grandma wanted to be a considerate grandma and wants to consider others' needs, there is room for it. So if we have seen environments in which we have very considerate elders, they are paying attention to each other, and it is possible. Whereas in a competitive structure, it's a lot harder to pay attention to needs, because you need to actually pay attention to the flaws. You need to pay attention to the opportunities so that you can climb up, in the whole hierarchy of things. So I think the focus, the grooming itself, there's no space for you to, you're not, there is no reward in paying attention to needs. Whereas in an elder based structure, if the grandma chooses to pay attention and be considerate, there are inherent rewards in it. The family bonds together more, there's pleasure in it more. So there are rewards in paying attention to each other's needs, and this there is opportunity for it. Does every grandma do that? May not be. Does every grandma and grandpa do that? Not, may not be. But are there great grandparents? Absolutely. Right? We have seen that. We have definitely seen that. Extremely considerate. There's a lot of room for it. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Any other differences you can find between leadership in these structures, or these structures in general? One thing that strikes me is how leaders are formed in these structures, right? Who becomes the leader in an elder based structure is rarely up to question. It's almost obvious. It's age dependent. So the 20-year-old can't come and say, tomorrow onwards, I'm going to be the leader. That doesn't happen. And it's not like they can actually fight a game and win the game, and it's a fair game, everybody understands it. That doesn't happen, right? It's not a given for the, whereas in a young company, it's perfectly understandable. A 20-year-old hotshot comes in, climbs up the ranks really fast, and becomes the CEO. Top CEO, best under the 30s, best, top 30 under 30, top 20 under 20, whatnot, whatnot. We celebrate this kind of notion of taking on that leadership. You're kind of grabbing that position and becoming the leader. Whereas in an elder based structure, there is that scope for it doesn't even exist. It's not even a concept. Right? And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. Would you want a better leader when there is a terrible grandma there? Would you like for somebody else to take over? Would be lovely. Right? So it's not necessarily a great thing. I'm not assigning judgment to it, but I'm just saying that the way leadership emerges in these two contexts are significantly different.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is related, but so my mom, so now she's a grandmom to Max, and she's just been amazing. Like she's, head over heels over him. And so there's so much, even in terms of help for us, like when we are, um, I would go, we want to leave Max with her. And so that love, so I don't think that comes in a corporate structure, right? Like genuine love and feeling for someone and taking care of them. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting one too. I think there is a lot of room for nurture in elder based structures, which is not often seen in competitive environments. It's very difficult to create that room for nurture, right? Whereas elder based leadership can be built on nurture. So you can literally say, yes, I am grandma. All of you will respect me because I love you all loads. I feed you sweets till you can't eat sweets anymore. I will pamper you till I can't pamper you anymore. So you can literally win your space, not win your space, but kind of justify your role, saying, yeah, my role of leadership is that of nurture. That's all I'm required to do. All of you respect me. What do I need to do in return? I don't have to generate money. I don't have to prove a point. I don't have to invent anything. My role is assigned to me because I just choose to infuse you with love. So I think there is room for that. Not necessarily that everybody does it, but there's room for that. Which is I've never heard of that in the corporate world kind of a thing. So individual structures don't necessarily do that. And individual structures outside of the corporate rarely have interconnectedness to this extent. So who is actually going around claiming a leadership role based on, hey, I am the loving grandma, like that position, right? Who's going to grant you that position if there's nobody around to grant you that position? So that's the other thing, right? It's these roles that they play are so dependent on who assigns these roles to you. Somebody is assigning the roles to you. Whereas leadership in a individual based structure is often taken, not assigned, not given. It's taken. I am the leader. I'm a natural leader. So you see this emerge not in familial structures, but you see them emerge in, like a friends party, friends group, residents group, volunteers group, any kind of groups. You see them, and there's a natural leader who will emerge, and it's not an assigned role necessarily, and it's taken. Yeah, Analik, I'll come to you in just a second. Let me take that down. Space for love. Yeah, I wanted to know that one. Yeah.
Um, what I was thinking of is a comparison between the two systems is in individual structures, or if I compare with corporate structures, working hard to be seen and get a reward, recognition. So you have to, well, maybe it's a personal experience, you work very hard to show that, yeah, you're worth and that you can get more rewards. And if it's a salary or otherwise recognition. In individual or elder-based structures, you are seen because you're part of it, right? So, of course, you may still want to have more love or more do something, but being yourself naturally comes, yeah. You can't do more than being yourself, basically, right? Everybody knows you in the elder-based structure from early on, so your identity is known. Whereas that you need to deserve in individual structures.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because definitely in competition-based structures, this making yourself known, proving your worth, and because you prove your worth, you get a higher position, a higher ranking, a higher standing in society, a higher something because you proved yourself, right? So that's a very competition based kind of a structure. Whereas elder based structures, on the other hand, yes, it's a lovely thing that you're known just because you're part of it, but also you're seen way too much just because you're part of it. I don't want to be part of it, but I'm still part of it. I'm forced into it. It's almost like you're part of it whether you like it or no. There's a role for you whether you like it or no. There's no choice, right? You are part of it because you exist, you're part of it. And there is a very clear path for you there. Whether that, and I think that is the pros and the cons of the elder based structure. It's packaged, it's such a sandwich, right? Is you are seen, you are of value because you exist. So you're of great value because you exist. But your path is so clearly defined that you can't stray away from it. You're part of a script, right? So there is a structure, there is a network, and this girl has been born, a daughter has been born. We see her, she's part of it, but she's required to play this role. The role is predefined. You have to play that role, but you're seen just because you're part of it. So I think it brings both sides of it, where you, and this is a network thing, right? So there's a book that I'm reading. It's very far from here, so I will not pick it up right now. It's called 1,000 Plateaus, where they talk about two interesting concepts, arborescent and rhizomatic. Arborescent is like a tree. Main trunk, branch, branch, branch. From it, branch, branch. More from it, branch, branch. So it's all organized. So there's a singular starting and then it branches, branches, branches. And that's kind of the organization of a corporate structure. If you see, corporate structures look like trees, right? They will actually literally tell you that this is the corporate tree, right? The tree-like structure that they have. Whereas rhizomatic is seen more like mycelium networks. There are no clear branches. There is no clear singular. It's just spread all over. It's network left, right, and center. And what's interesting about it, and there'll be local leaders that emerge. There are local hotspots that emerge, right? There is the and what are the centers of powers in a networked system like that? Center of power is the one who's most networked, the one who's connected the most, and that's usually why grandma wins, right? Because of that extraordinary network that she has. Everybody is listening to her, everybody is talking to her, and she makes it her business at every wedding to meet every damn person, so that she's extremely well networked, right? So there are these leaders that are based on these hubs. They're the centers of network. But the thing is that everybody is playing a role in the network. The network suffers if the network cuts somewhere, because it's interconnected. And so it becomes very critical then for everybody to say that you have to play your role in this network. You have to be part of this. And we are all stable because we are all balancing on each other in a very fragile way. And so you have to be part of this. Which I think segues very nicely into this thing, right? Is an elder-based structure is a very nice thing to talk about till you realize that in order to be part of it, you lose your individuality. You are seen very well, but you're seen as part of the whole, not by yourself. You're not seen as an individual. And that's interesting. Whether that's a good or a bad thing. As individuals, as we experience it, it may be terrible. But for the larger good of the society, larger good of knowledge transmission, so on and so forth, is it a good or a bad thing? It's a long discussion, I think. I don't think we necessarily need to get into that aspect of it. But this is an interesting one. Okay. So we've looked at how leadership emerges, and unless anybody else has anything to add to leadership, I'd like to move on to talking about the idea of elder abuse. Does elder abuse happen in elder-based structures? Does respecting elders mean that no elders are abused? Do you know examples of abuse? Yeah, Anulika?
The first thought I have is this is cultural. Maybe also partially coming back to what, sorry, I forgot your name.
Gwen.
The French.
Gwen
said the cultures. I grew up in Europe, in the Netherlands, and I am in India now, and I see a big difference also in general in cultures. And I'm not saying that individual families and structures, elder structures, are not different. I mean, there are exceptions everywhere, but
yeah.
But what she said is very, I think, generally in Western cultures, younger, standing in the middle of life with all the new knowledge and all the news and the energy and vibrance and connections and with the outside world, younger generations feel that they're much more in powerful positions. When elders are retired, they are becoming, I'm not saying useless, but yeah, in that corporate view, they are no longer part of that. And And so their world becomes smaller, and they're not really up to date with anything anymore. I mean, I'm just generalizing, but that's a very cultural thing, where also respect. I mean, even in a very young age, young teenagers abuse parents for this by saying, "Yeah, you have no idea, right? I know it all better," and they can. With 16, 17 years, they can be independent, and financially there's support, social security. Yeah, so that you don't need the elders to survive, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that this happens probably in every culture, but it may happen more in the cultures, the more individualistic cultures, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas you don't have that luxury to be independent and financially independent and all live by yourself in certain other cultures and parts of the world. So it's harder to abuse elders
Yeah.
if you're dependent on family structures.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Roma, do you have something to add? Then we'll discuss both points together. You're on mute.
So, with regards to the abuse in elder-based structure, I was just wondering that, when the leadership starts crumbling, it could be anything like maybe age or, um, things like that. And that's when the next leader has to arise. So then uh, that is where I feel, it is the person who's at the top keeping everybody together is more susceptible to abuse because somebody has to prove their um, credibility to take over and put this person aside.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So basically, then what we're saying is when we have practices from individual based cultures, competition based cultures start entering into elder based structures, then it can likely lead to elder abuse, because then that leadership is not taken for granted. It's seen as leadership crumbling, because otherwise I cannot see an old grandma's leadership crumbling, right? Like she can get weak, she can be bedridden, and she can still be the boss of the house. So that doesn't deter her. But when there are when other members feel like this elder based leadership is often granted, but if they feel like we don't want to grant this, we'd rather not grant this, and then we actually start seeing um, and want a different kind of a leadership emerge, we can start actually seeing abuse. Any other situations where you've seen elder abuse? Yeah, Juhi.
I'm not sure about this one, but like I think when older people get unwell,
Hmm.
like either they're not taken care of well, or like they're taunted, like, hey, you did this, that's why you're here, that kind of abuse. I've seen that with 2 3 cases, and it's coming back to they were not well enough to, and they're already in miserable state, and they're like end of life kind of thing, and then you're getting taunted, and also like by the wife. These both examples that I'm talking about are the male members who are not very dominant, so to say, in the structure, and and the wives have been abusing them like when they were old. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? When we talk about this and say, if they're not well, um, and that is something that is so easy to understand with dogs too, right? So if there's an elder based structure and there is a leader who's an elder, but if that leader who's an elder actually is unwell, like terminally unwell and things like that, it is possible for them to not be regarded as an elder, not be respected anymore, and being abused, being picked on, so on and so forth. We do see it. Not always, So it's not always the case, but it definitely, I think, can happen. So I think I'm just listening to the conversations, and I have to talk about dogs, right? So I'm mapping this to dogs constantly, and I'm like, oh, this works. This works for dogs. This, like, all of it checks off for dogs. Like, I can see it, and I can see it in Chaita's family dynamics here. So it's quite extraordinary. But yeah, I think health um, definitely plays a role. Okay. So now, unless somebody has anything else to add to that, the next question I'd like to bring up is, can we think of pros and cons of elder based structures? What is good about it? What's bad about it? We've discussed a lot of it already, but worth kind of calling it out. Yeah, Jiffy.
Yeah, I think the biggest pro, I think even like Gwen mentioned, is about the transfer of knowledge and like these, the food recipes or what you did back then. I feel for me that's the biggest, pro about the structure, the just getting all this knowledge from them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a not a trivial thing to think about, right? Because it is, so if you think about, for instance, the entire Indian cuisine, right? It is a lot of knowledge that's transferred through elder-based structures of many, many families. It's not one or two, right? It's millions and millions and millions who have successfully managed to transfer this over. And if you think about the things that we learn in our lifetime, each of us in the last decade, how much have you learned? I'm sure you feel like you've learned a lot. One person, and you've learned a lot. And if you had a mentee and you could pass that along to that mentee, right? And I have a lot of mentees, many of you study with me, and every time I pass it along, I see that there is potential for that idea to grow. And this is just in our lifetimes. This is just one generation, right? You're taking it, you're growing it. Now, this being done by millions of people over and over and over, generation after generation, I think we are creating like a very solid knowledge base. And if you think about dogs as well, right? What are the things they may learn and they may pass on? Think about it. Largely, it may have to do with how to deal with humans, how to procure food, what to be wary of, what to be afraid of, what is danger, what is worth pursuing, and they're building a repository of knowledge that is multi generational. And if you say it that way, you realize how powerful that can be, right? Multi generational knowledge passed down. So I don't think we should dismiss off grandma's pickle recipe that easily, because there's something extraordinary that's actually happening over there. So I think it can be very powerful. Yeah, I think that's definitely a plus. What else? Just give me a second. Yeah, Roma.
So I feel like the elder-based structures, although they pass on the knowledge and everything to you, they could at times make you feel tired and not let you kind of really explore what you want to. So, if I can give one example, probably what I've seen around a family of dogs, um, so there's this family of dogs which so they would eat food, but they have never encouraged touch from anybody. And this entire family is like similar because of their past experiences. So all the puppies were also like that. Now, last year, the litter that was born, one dog from that decided, no, but I want to experience the touch, and I am going to not listen to them. And there's a lot of conflict that I could see happening there, but then this fellow was like, no, I have to experience it. And that came. And now with this fellow, three siblings followed. So now the older ones, till they know me for like 4, 5 years now, but they stand at a distance. But this younger lot has decided, okay, this woman feels safe and we reciprocate, touch with her and we can be around her in touching distance. So, so this was probably like, it didn't go down with the family well. Um, and then off late, I'm seeing that one of the mums has decided to come near because now, like, she has learned from her pup. So there was some unlearning in one of the mums that has happened. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit of what Juhi has also said, which we can discuss together, which is there's also generational trauma, right? Passing on of trauma. And absolutely there is passing on of trauma, but also I think the question we need to ask is whether that passing on of trauma is necessarily an evil by itself, or it's something that we experience, but there's actually an evolutionary reason for it. So think about dogs, for instance. A dog who has been traumatized, a mom dog who has been traumatized, learns that in order to keep myself safe, I have to be away from human beings. Is it a good or a bad thing that she passes that fear and trauma on to her kids? Depending on the environment, that may not always be a bad thing. It may actually be a good thing, right? I learned from the environment that you don't go near these people. Let's not talk about humans. Let's talk about snakes. I learned from the environment that I should not go near snakes. Is it a good thing that the puppy learns this fear of snakes? Absolutely fabulous. So, this is good. Now, is it a good thing that they learn this about humans? I don't want to go near humans. Maybe, maybe not, because that's subjective, right? So, you may be very, depending on where you are, you may be very safe if you chose not to go near humans. But if you are in, maybe a friendly neighbor has come in, maybe the environment has changed, and maybe those old rules don't apply anymore. That trauma is not worth passing along. Maybe new rules are required. Um, so that's, I think, what a lot of us experience, which is, hey, there's no reason to carry this trauma on. I think this, it's okay to drop it and finish it here. We don't need this level of caution. For instance, a lot of trauma that's passed on for me from my mother is women are not safe, but we live in an environment where women are a little safer than when she was growing up. So I don't need that level of caution that she's actually passing on to me. I can be more less cautious, and so maybe it's not the best thing for me. Um, but I think it's worth debating whether it's from an overall big picture perspective. Is it a good thing for us to like lose it very quickly, or is it better for us to lose the trauma more cautiously? Right? And this is not glorifying anybody's trauma. Please don't think that I'm, suggesting that you need it, or, I myself carry a lot of trauma and I hate the fact that I have to carry it. Um, but also, I think it's worth questioning, why does this mechanism exist where we transfer this like this, right? Um, yeah, okay. Okay, so we did talk about loss of individuality that also happens with elder-based structures. Now, along with knowledge of transfer, and I'll put this sort of a question mark, which is transfer of trauma, whether it goes in the pros or the cons. I think one can argue that it can sit in both, and that's probably the gray area that we need to kind of navigate. Um, Also, the space for non-competitive existence. That's a pro, right? You don't have to compete all the time. You don't have to, perform all the time in order to belong. And interconnectedness. You're not an individual. You're never an individual. So if you need somebody, they're there even before you ask. They're there even when you ask them to leave. They won't go away. And we know that social isolation can lead to intense mental health issues. That's not a problem we are going to run into. We run into different set of problems, not that. Social isolation is not a concern for us. Different set of problems. So I think, yeah, like I think these can fall in like both pros and cons, right? Okay. Can any of you think of any other pros and cons? Yeah, Julie.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a pro or con. It's just what I've observed when I was younger. I didn't like getting that information, though the information was correct. Like now, when I go back to it, just a small example, like ghee is good for you, right? And because of Western influence, I was like, no, no, no. And there was 1 year in my life where I didn't put ghee on roti, and thinking it's not good for you. But now, in hindsight, now I know better. But I didn't receive that information well because I don't know, I didn't respect that or whatever the angle was, and a lot of Western influence. So it's also how you pass the information on, or how convincing it is, or is there something better out there? I don't know how that
Yeah.
goes.
So I think this highlights an interesting thing about elder-based structures. Elder-based structures are most fragile around youth. Youth is when we challenge elder-based structures the most. We are likely to break it. We are likely to rupture it. We are likely to break the chain of passing of knowledge. Um, but we don't question it. Like, we don't supersede. So you don't expect the teenager to say, I'm going to be the head of the family from tomorrow. That's not it. But they disrupt the structure, and youth will disrupt structure no matter what structure you put them in. Individual, elder base, competition, youth is youth, teenage is teenage, right? They're disruptors. If they're meant to be disruptors, I think there's a evolutionary advantage for them to be disruptors. It is required, right? So, like Roma said, the one who disrupts and says, hey, I don't need this anymore, I need to go in a new direction, that's youth. That shows up in youth. And I think that happens. But I think that disruption with an elder based structure is more about I will break the chain of knowledge, but not as much I will become the leader. Whereas with competitive structures, they can I am the leader, and that I think is a little bit problematic, that somebody so young and inexperienced can become a leader. Right? There's a 20 something year old becoming a CEO. We have seen this story play out so badly, repeatedly, over and over, right? Grandma, however nasty she is still safer bet than my 20-year-old cousin who is now grandma, playing grandma's role. Like, no, that doesn't work. So I think that's yeah, youth is disrupting. I'm just going to write that down because I think that's a pretty cool thing. Okay. Do you have any other thoughts before I ask one interesting final question? Yeah. Yeah. No.
Well, so just a few talks. Corporate, I think it's one pro for the people that like it. Okay, so it's you have more rules and control, about everything, and okay, in 5 years this will be like this. So yeah, in elder base you don't know. You have to live, and then you see. And you are talking about evolutionary, and so I think it makes me think: is possible corporate system? How I can say to get some evolution? I don't think so. They are very rigid, so they don't move from there. So it's more difficult for them to grow as individual, and the elder base allow that possibility. Not always, but sometimes it gives that possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Roma, do you have something to add? Then I'll discuss both points together.
No, I kind of had a slightly different one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're talking about the pros and cons of enterprise structures. I was just wondering, might not be true in every case, but in elder-based structure, like control leadership, like could also lead to mental health issues because you feel kind of suffocated and you feel you don't have a voice. So in structures which are well balanced, there could be, it would boost your mental health, but then there could also be structures where, uh, it could negatively affect your mental health. That's it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I said, right? That's, I think, a feature of bad leadership, right? A controlling structure where there's no room for growth is a feature of bad leadership, and that's not unique to elder-based structures. Bad leadership can exist anywhere,
Yeah.
right? It's not exactly like, individual-based structures have great mental health. They don't, right? And so I think bad leadership can exist anywhere. So I think the question is, where do we actually see the differences between the two? Where do we actually see them as, uniquely different? And to some extent, I think, no, you have I'm understanding, and I need to process it a little bit more. What you're saying in terms of growth, the space for growth. I think corporates can grow, but I see what you say, because individual growth in it, while there's so much celebration for the individual growth in it cannot be that much, because it's very hard to create a supportive structure given the amount of competition in there, right? So as you start growing, there's somebody who's going to start losing because you're winning. I mean, I was just having this conversation with a friend today, where a lot of people seem to think that negotiations are always about win lose. And so it's almost to the point where I want more important than seeing myself win is to see somebody else lose, because that makes me feel like I have won. That making somebody feel like they have lost is rewarded in competition based structures. Whereas that is not such a critical key component of elder based structures. Some may do it, and those are bad examples, right? But it's not critical. It's not like, hey, if you don't do it, this structure won't exist. Not true. It exists. And it can exist in and flourish and thrive without that. So if a group comes together and says, no, this is a nourishing environment we're going to create and have an elder based structure, I think there can be sparks and there can be a lot of growth within that subunit. And if you look at the large picture, that can actually create pockets of some stellar growth. So that's interesting. Okay, great. We are kind of out of time. This is very interesting, and I'll wrap this up by saying that what I'm going to do over the next few days is I'm going to now take all these ideas that you've given, and I would love for all of you to do this too. So I'll try and send out the notes of what we've discussed. Think about the parallels of the points that we discussed with dogs. Where are the parallels, right? What are the parallels? What can we learn from it? Do we see these things? Especially those of you who have access to street dogs, please do that. Share it. Especially the backbit guys, please share it on our backbit group, and you can share it on the larger group too. Those of you who don't have street dogs, you do still get to observe other kinds of dynamics, so you can exchange notes, right? And say, look, I saw this. This looks like more individual based. This looks like more elder based. I will argue that we're going to see all these variations that we spoke about. We're going to see all of that in dogs. That's my hypothesis. So let's see if that's possible. Let's try and find examples, right? Do you see individual based structures? Do you see a bad boss? Do you see capitalistic structures? Do you also see, for instance, individuals who want to live individual lives, but they live in the proximity of elder based structures? I see that here. For instance, Chaita and her group are elder based structures, but Elvis and his friends are not. They're individuals. How do they interact? What is that interaction point? How does that look? Can there be individuals in our own societies? We do, right? We do have elder based structures, and then we do have individuals like me, who live by myself, I'm not accountable, this kind of a thing. So there are individuals too. And where do our worlds intersect, and what are the rules of that intersection? How do they do that? Whose rules are they following? Do they follow rules? Do they understand this? Do they follow rules of competition, or do they follow rules of respect? Which of them are they likely to follow? If Chaita encounters somebody from Elvis's group, is there going to be a form? Is Chaita going to expect leadership because she has been given that position in her family? Is she going to expect it? Is the individual going to say, no, I am used to grabbing it, so I'm going to take it? Is this like a full on conflict, or do they have a way of resolving this? These are all interesting things to explore. I would Some of you who are in backbed can do projects as well. You have projects to do. So these are all interesting topics to pick up and do projects on. But any stories that you see around any of these topics, right? Share. Let's see how much we can see in the dog world, because here's the truth. How much of this exists in the dog world? There's nobody out there who has an answer. We are the ones who have to answer this. Okay, this is on us. So we've now listed out a few things. Let's try and now see what we see in the dog world and share it with the others. And let's maybe think of doing another one later where we kind of circle back what we gather from all the stories and try to put it in perspective. And of course, whatever talk I come up with in the end for this, I will repeat it for all of you guys so that it ties these ideas together and you can see how it comes together. Sounds good? All right. And with that, I suppose all the backbed people, I'm going to be seeing you in India, in Bangalore on Tuesday. Yes. All right. Okay, guys. See you. See you soon in person in a few hours. Bye.